My name is Jack, and I've always been a skeptic. I didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything that couldn't be explained by logic. But that all changed the night I ventured into the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was a place people avoided, filled with the abandoned and forgotten. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, always claiming it was cursed. But I figured they were just afraid of something as simple as the dark. One late autumn evening, I found myself walking past its weathered gates. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene. I had been drinking, my nerves were a bit on edge, and curiosity tugged at me. I was about to walk away when I noticed something odd. There was a fresh grave, its dirt still, loose and uneven. But what stood out to me was the tombstone, a large, cracked marble slab with strange symbols etched into it. The name on the stone was unfamiliar, Edwin Blackwood. I approached the grave, almost entranced by the strange markings. It wasn't just a regular tombstone. The symbols, though worn by time, were clearly intentional. I felt a strange pull, as if something inside me was telling me to stay. Suddenly, I heard it faint at first, a whisper, "Help me." I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one in sight. The cemetery was as empty as it had been when I first arrived. I told myself it was just the wind, a trick of my mind playing games on me. But the whisper came again, louder this time, and it seemed to be coming from the grave. "Help me, Jack." I froze. My blood ran cold. How did it know my name? With trembling hands, I reached out and touched the tombstone. The moment my fingers made contact, the ground beneath me seemed to tremble. I stumbled back, feeling the pressure in the air build, as if the very earth were alive and angry. The whispering continued, growing more desperate. "Please, help me." Without thinking, I dropped to my knees and began digging, my hands moving frantically through the loose dirt. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I couldn't stop. There was a force compelling me to continue. After what felt like an eternity, my hands struck something solid. I cleared away the remaining dirt and found a small wooden box, old and weathered by time. I could feel the weight of it, the presence inside, and I knew in that moment that I had made a terrible mistake. I opened the box, and there, wrapped in tattered cloth, was a small, mummified hand. It was cold to the touch, but I felt an undeniable connection. The moment my fingers brushed against it, the whispers stopped. There was only silence. But the silence didn't last long. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the ground, grabbing my wrist with an iron grip. I screamed and tried to pull away, but the hand tightened, pulling me toward the grave. I could hear something beneath the earth, a voice, low and guttural, speaking in an ancient tongue. The ground around me began to shift, and I could see the earth moving, as if something was rising. A face appeared from the dirt, pale and decayed, with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. It was Edwin Blackwood, or what had become of him. His body had been buried long ago, but his soul had been trapped, waiting for someone to release him. "You shouldn't have disturbed me," he hissed, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. I fought to break free, but his grip was unrelenting. The whispers started again, this time from every direction, filling my mind with their maddening sound. "You should have never come here." The last thing I remember was the sensation of being dragged into the earth, swallowed whole by the grave. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground in the cemetery, the night sky now dark and silent. The tombstone was gone, and the grave had been filled. I stood up shakily, my head spinning, as I left the cemetery. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every time I turned a corner or passed a shadow, I thought I saw a figure watching me from the corner of my eye. And then, one night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again whispering, soft and distant, but unmistakable. "Jack." The voice was familiar, and this time, it was not in my head. "My name is Thomas. I've always been the type to avoid the unknown, but one summer evening, my curiosity got the better of me. The old cemetery at the edge of town had always intrigued me, its worn-out gates creaking on windy days, and the towering statues that loomed over the graves, their eyes staring blankly into the void. I had passed it countless times, but something about that evening felt different. The sun had barely dipped beneath the horizon when I decided to take a walk through the cemetery. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and a strange stillness filled the space. The gravestones, some old and some newer, dotted the landscape. But one statue in particular caught my attention. It was a figure of a man, tall and unnervingly lifelike. His features were meticulously carved, but his smile, his grin was unsettling. It wasn't just any smile. It was a wide, eerie grin that stretched unnaturally across his face, like he knew something I didn't. I stood there for a moment, transfixed by the statue. The longer I stared, the more I felt something shift in the air. It was as if the shadows deepened, and the graveyard seemed to grow colder. Then, out of nowhere, a voice called out, "Thomas, .. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, soft, raspy, almost as though it had been whispered directly into my ear. But there was no one around. I turned quickly, scanning the cemetery, but all I could see was the statue, its grin growing wider, almost stretching beyond its carved limitations. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The grin on the statue widened even further. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. It was just a statue, I told myself. Just an old stone figure. But my feet refused to move. I heard it again, only this time, it was louder, more urgent. "Thomas, I'm waiting." I turned and ran, my shoes slipping on the wet grass as I stumbled away from the statue. My pulse was pounding in my ears, my legs carrying me faster than I had ever run before. But the sound of footsteps echoed behind me, keeping pace with my frantic steps. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw nothing but darkness. I reached the cemetery gates, but as I pushed them open, I realized something. There was no sound. The footsteps had stopped. The air had returned to its usual stillness. I looked back once more, just to be sure. The statue was still there, but now, the grin on its face was even wider, as though it were mocking me. I ran all the way home that night, locking every door, bolting every window. I told myself it was just my imagination, just the lingering effects of an overactive mind. But the next morning, as I was brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The grin was on my face, wide, uncontrollable, and it wasn't going away. My name is Emma. I've always enjoyed the peaceful solitude of my evening walks, but I never imagined a simple walk through the old cemetery would change my life forever. It started when I decided to explore St. David's Cemetery, an old, abandoned graveyard on the outskirts of town. The place was known for its eerie atmosphere, with crumbling gravestones and a thick mist that seemed to hover over the ground even during daylight. Locals often whispered about the cemetery, claiming it was haunted, but I never put stock in such tales. I went there that evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was cold, and the fog seemed heavier than usual, swallowing everything around me. My boots crunched against the frost-covered ground as I made my way through the rows of gravestones. The place had a certain charm to it, despite its decay, but something felt off. As I passed a particularly old gravestone, I noticed something strange, a figure standing at the edge of the cemetery, just beyond the wrought iron gates. A man, tall and slender, dressed in an old-fashioned black suit. His face was obscured by the shadows, but there was something deeply unsettling about his presence. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the cemetery, as if waiting for something or someone. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My first instinct was to leave, but curiosity tugged at me. Who was this man? Why was he standing out here at such an odd hour? I took a step closer, but just as I did, the fog seemed to thicken, and I lost sight of him. The air grew colder, and I heard the faintest whisper, like a voice carried on the wind. Come closer, ... I hesitated, but something compelled me to move forward. As I reached the gates, the man reappeared, this time much closer. He was no longer standing still, but now moving toward me with slow, deliberate steps. His face was pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. You shouldn't be here, he said, in a voice that sent a chill down my spine. I tried to turn and run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. His eyes held me in place, paralyzing me with fear. Leave, he whispered again, this time louder, and the air around me seemed to ripple with a strange energy. Finally, I broke free from his gaze and sprinted back toward the cemetery path, heart racing. But just as I reached the gates, I heard him one last time, closer now, right behind me. Not yet. I stumbled out of the cemetery, my hands trembling. As I looked back, I could have sworn I saw the man standing at the entrance, but his figure was fading, dissolving into the mist. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the man haunted my every thought, and the voice kept echoing in my mind. The next morning, I decided to return to the cemetery, hoping to find some explanation for the strange encounter. I didn't want to believe what I'd seen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me there. When I arrived, everything seemed normal at first. The gravestones were still weathered, the fog still lingered, but as I walked deeper into the cemetery, something caught my eye. One of the gravestones had been freshly dug up. The name on it was unfamiliar, William Merrickand. The date of death was recent, but when I looked closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The grave wasn't empty. There, lying in the dirt, was the same man I had seen the night before. His pale face was staring up at me, lifeless, with his hollow eyes wide open. And as I stood there, frozen with terror, I heard a whisper, soft but unmistakable. You should have left. My name is Lucas. I took the job as a gravedigger at St. Hollow's Cemetery because I needed the money. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet. Work until I found the unmarked grave. It was late last night, well past midnight, when the incident happened. I was finishing up a burial for a local family, the kind of work that had become routine for me. The cemetery was still, the air cold and damp, and I felt the usual solitude as I dug the final resting place for the deceased. But something was off. As my shovel struck something hard in the ground, I thought it was just a rock or a buried root, but it didn't feel right. It was too smooth, too solid. I scraped away the dirt, my curiosity getting the better of me. There, buried beneath the fresh grave, was an old, wooden coffin. There was no headstone, no markings, nothing to indicate it was even supposed to be there. I leaned in closer, examining the box. The wood was rotted in places, dark and cracked, like it had been buried for decades, maybe longer. I pushed my shovel into the earth around it to make space, my heart starting to race as the unease settled in my gut. What was this doing here? Then, I heard it. A soft, steady tapping. At first I thought it was an animal, a rodent or something, but the tapping grew louder, more rhythmic. And then, to my horror, the tapping turned into a scratching sound, like fingernails dragging against the wood from inside the coffin. My pulse quickened. I backed away, stumbling as panic surged through me. This wasn't possible. No one had been buried here in years. There were no records of any unmarked graves. But the noise, oh God, the noise was real. The scratching turned frantic. The lid of the coffin creaked as something pushed against it, as if something or someone was trying to escape. And then, it spoke, a dry, rasping whisper that slid through the air like a cold wind. Lucas. My blood ran cold. I froze, unable to move. as that voice echoed in the dead silence of the cemetery. I don't know how I managed to move, but suddenly I was running. I bolted back to the entrance, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. My legs felt like lead, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps as I neared the gate. The wind howled behind me, as if urging me to leave, as if the cemetery itself wanted me gone. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, and drove as fast as I could, not stopping until I was safely locked inside my apartment. I thought I'd left it all behind. The whispers, the scratching, the grave that wasn't supposed to exist. But when I woke up this morning, the nightmare hadn't ended. There was dirt on my bedroom floor. Fresh, wet dirt, as if something had been dragged across it. I went to the closet, my heart in my throat hand, found the door slightly ajar. Inside, there was nothing but darkness, but I could hear it, a soft tapping, just beneath the floorboards. My name is Nathan. I never believed in ghosts, curses, or any of that supernatural crap. But after last night, I can't explain what I saw. And worse, I don't think I made it out alone. I work at Greenhaven Cemetery as a groundskeeper. A simple job. Keep the grass trimmed, clear out dead flowers, and make sure the graves stay undisturbed. But yesterday, something was wrong. One of the graves was open, not like it had been dug up. The dirt wasn't piled on the sides, and there was no sign of a shovel. It looked like something had climbed out. I checked the name on the headstone. Margaret Holloway. Died 1923. The wooden coffin inside was splintered open, as if something had burst out from within. My stomach twisted. Graves don't just open on their own. I called my supervisor, but my phone had no signal. Typical. Figuring I'd just reported in the morning, I turned to leave. Then, I heard breathing, slow, ragged, and impossibly close. I swung my flashlight around. The graveyard was empty, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from the open grave. I stepped closer, heart hammering. Hello. The breathing quickened. Then something moved in the darkness below. A pale hand shot up, fingers gnarled and thin, dirt falling from its nails. I stumbled back as another hand emerged, gripping the edges of the grave. And then, she pulled herself up. Her skin was gray, stretched tight over sharp bones. Her empty eye sockets locked onto me as her cracked lips parted. Nathan, she whispered. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car, peeling out of the cemetery without looking back. But now, sitting in my apartment, I can still hear it. The slow, ragged breathing, and when I look in the mirror, there's dirt on my hands. My name is Daniel. I've been a security guard at Blackridge Cemetery for 3 years. It's a quiet job, mostly just chasing off vandals or drunks who think it's funny to hang out among the dead. But last night was different. It started with a whisper. I was making my usual rounds when I heard it soft, distant, like the wind carrying a secret. I stopped, turning my flashlight toward the graves. Nothing but rows of weathered tombstones, their names barely legible. Then, I heard it again. Daniel. I froze. It was coming from the graves. The whispering grew, overlapping voices murmuring just beneath the surface. I stepped closer, heart hammering. The names on the tombstones seemed to shift, the letters twisting, rearranging. They spelled my name. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't possible. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I saw movement, dark figures standing behind the tombstones, watching me. Then, the ground trembled. A low groan echoed from beneath my feet. The soil cracked. Fingers thin and skeletal pushed through the dirt. The voices turned into wails. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the cemetery gates. When I turned back, the whispering had stopped. The graves were still. The names were back to normal. But I know what I saw, and when I got home, I found something on my kitchen table. a weathered tombstone fragment with my name carved into it. My name is Adam. I work the night shift at Ravenwood Cemetery, a place so old that half the tombstones are unreadable. It's just me, my flashlight, and miles of dead silence. Or at least, it should have been. Last night, I saw him again. It started 2 weeks ago. While making my rounds, I noticed a figure standing beneath the large oak tree near the center of the cemetery. Tall, thin, dressed in a black suit. He didn't move, didn't even shift his weight, just stood there, watching me. I called out, thinking it was some lost mourner. No response. As I stepped closer, the air grew thick, heavy, like I was moving through water. My flashlight flickered. Then he was gone. No footsteps, no sign of movement, just vanished. Since then, I've seen him every night, always at the edge of my vision. Sometimes behind a gravestone, sometimes by the fence. Always. Watching last night, I decided to confront him. I walked straight toward him, gripping my flashlight tight. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Why do you keep following me?" He didn't answer, didn't move, but as I got closer, I saw his face, or rather, the lack of one. There were no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched over his skull. Then he tilted his head, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. It felt like something invisible wrapped around my throat, tightening, crushing. My vision blurred, my knees buckled. I thought I was going to die then. As quickly as it started, it stopped. I gasped for air, stumbling backward. My flashlight flickered again, and when it came back on, he was gone. I ran. When I got home, I locked every door, every window, but as I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I noticed something in the corner of my room. A shadow, tall, thin dot, watching. My name is Lucas. I've always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, urban legends, all just nonsense people use to scare themselves. But after what happened last night, I can't explain it. I can't even begin to understand it. It started with a dare. My friends and I were drinking at Evan's place when the conversation turned to the old Blackwood Cemetery on the edge of town. People said it was haunted, that something in there didn't like visitors. Evan, being the idiot he was, bet me $50 I wouldn't spend an hour alone inside. I laughed. That's it. Easiest $50 I'll ever make. Midnight. Flashlight in hand, I walked through the rusted gates. The air was thick, damp, and carried the scent of wet earth. My footsteps crunched against the gravel path as I moved deeper into the graveyard. The headstones, worn and cracked, jutted out of the ground like broken teeth. Then, I saw it, an unmarked grave. The dirt was disturbed, fresh, as if someone had just been buried, or worse, as if something had crawled out. I felt it before I heard it. A chill, unnatural and sharp, crawled down my spine. Then, the whisper. "Lucas." The voice was distant but unmistakable. My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my grip. No one. Just rows of silent graves. Then, the whisper came again, closer. "Lucas." My heart pounded. "Who's there?" My voice was steady, but my legs were locked in place. Silence. Then the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled back as a hand, thin, pale, and covered in dirt, shot out of the unmarked grave. The thing that crawled out wasn't human. Its body was twisted, bones protruding beneath rotting skin. Its eyes were hollow sockets, and yet, I knew it was looking at me. I ran. I don't remember leaving the cemetery. I don't remember how I got home. But when I woke up this morning, my shoes were still covered in dirt, and outside my window, on the ground beneath it, were fresh, muddy footprints. My name is Ethan. I took the job at Hollowpine Cemetery because it was easy money. Dig a few graves, keep the grounds clean, and lock up at night. Simple, right? That's what I thought until I met Henry. Henry wasn't on the payroll. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He was just always around. An old man in a filthy coat, wandering between the graves. He never spoke, just nodded at me as he dragged his rusted shovel behind him. One night, as I was finishing up, I saw him standing by a grave that hadn't been there the day before. The dirt was fresh, uneven. "You working overtime?" I joked, trying to mask my unease. Henry turned to me, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken deep into their sockets. "Ain't my work," he muttered. His voice was dry, cracked, like he hadn't used it in years. I frowned. "Then whose is it?" He glanced around, then took a step closer. "Something down there don't want to stay buried." A cold shiver ran through me. "What?" Henry tapped the mound of dirt with his shovel. "Been digging itself out every night?" I laughed nervously. "You're messing with me." Henry didn't smile. "You lock up yet?" "No, not yet." He handed me a handful of iron nails. "Put these on the gate, keep it in." I was about to ask what he meant when I heard a faint scratching sound coming from beneath the fresh dirt. Then the ground moved. Something was pushing up from below. The soil trembled as bony fingers broke through the surface, stretching toward the sky. I stumbled back, heart pounding. "What the hell?" Henry swung his shovel, slamming it down onto the hand. A horrible screech echoed through the night, and the hand recoiled, disappearing back into the earth. "Go," Henry growled. Now, I didn't argue. I ran. I quit the next morning, but last night, as I was trying to sleep, I heard it again scratching right outside my window, and when I looked outside, there were fresh, muddy handprints on the glass. My name is Daniel. I never believed in ghosts or curses, at least. Not until I took the graveyard shift at St. Morrison's Cemetery. The job was simple: make rounds, keep out trespassers, and report anything unusual. The pay was decent, and honestly, I liked the solitude. But after a few nights, I realized that solitude was the last thing I'd have in this place. It started with whispers. At first I thought it was the wind, but the way the voices slithered between the tombstones, hushed yet urgent, made my skin crawl. They never spoke loud enough to understand, just enough to remind me I wasn't alone. Then, the footsteps came. Soft, slow, deliberate. I would turn, flashlight cutting through the darkness, only to find nothing. I convinced myself it was paranoid. I saw the woman. She stood near an old mausoleum, her back to me. She was dressed in a tattered black gown, her long, stringy hair swaying in the breeze. I hesitated. "Ma'am, the cemetery is closed." She didn't move. I took a step closer, heart hammering. "Ma'am, you." She turned. Her face was wrong. Her eyes were hollow pits. Her mouth stretched too wide, revealing teeth far too sharp. And then she screamed. The sound was a twisted, agonized wail, like a chorus of suffering souls crammed into one horrific voice. Every muscle in my body locked up. The air around me turned thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. Then, she rushed me. I ran. I don't remember how I got to my car, how I managed to start it with my shaking hands. But as I sped out of the cemetery, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror. She was standing at the gate, her mouth still open, her scream still ringing in my ears. I quit that night, but the thing is, every night since, I still hear her whispering my name. My name is Emma, and I found something in the attic that should have never been there. It all started with a rainy afternoon. I was home alone, rummaging through the house while my parents were out. The storm had knocked out the power, so I decided to explore the attic for anything that could entertain me. The attic door was old and creaked loudly when I opened it. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a faint, musty smell filled the air. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way up the wooden ladder. my heart pounding in anticipation. I wasn't expecting to find anything unusual, just old boxers and forgotten belongings. As I searched through the clutter, I stumbled upon a dusty cardboard box hidden away in the corner behind some old furniture. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a doll. At first, it seemed like any other old doll: wooden eyes, fraying dress, and a cracked porcelain face, but something about it made my skin crawl. The doll's eyes were fixed on me, unnervingly still, like they were watching my every move. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the eerie setting of the attic messing with my mind. But as I examined the doll closer, I noticed something disturbing. A small name tag was sewn into the back of its dress, something I hadn't seen before. The name read Lily. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't sure why, but the name seemed familiar. I left the attic with the doll in my arms, planning to show it to my parents when they came home. But that night, strange things started happening. I placed the doll on a shelf in my room, but when I woke up the next morning, it was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at me. Its eyes were open wide, and its mouth was twisted into a subtle grin. I assumed I must have moved it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't. Over the next few days, things escalated. The doll would be in different places when I woke up, always closer to me. Sometimes it would be sitting on my desk, other times on the floor, but never in the spot I had left it. Then, one night, I woke up to hear soft whispers in the room. I tried to ignore them, but they grew louder. "Lily, come play." The voice was soft and childlike, coming from the direction of the doll. Terrified, I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the doll. It was gone. I searched the room, frantically, my breath coming in short gasps. I checked under the bed, behind the curtains, everywhere. But the doll was nowhere to be found. That's when I heard the footsteps, tiny, slow steps, coming from the hallway outside my room. My heart raced as I held the flashlight tightly, the beam shaking as I pointed it toward the door. And then, through the crack of the door, I saw it. The doll was standing in the doorway, staring at me. It whispered again, louder this time, "Lily, it's time to play." I bolted out of bed and ran down the stairs, the doll's footsteps echoing behind me. I could hear it following me, but when I looked back, it was always just out of reach, never too far away. I don't know how long I ran through the house, but I eventually locked myself in the basement. The whispers stopped, but I still hear them, sometimes faint, echoing in the darkness. I haven't been able to get rid of the doll. I don't think I ever will, because every time I try, it always finds its way back. My name is Laura, and the shadows in my attic whisper my name every night. It started with the smell, a damp, earthy stench that crept down the stairs every evening. I thought it was just old wood or maybe mold, but the longer I stayed in the house, the stronger it became. The smell lingered in the air, thick and heavy, like something forgotten. But then came the noises, faint at first, like someone shuffling in the attic. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just the house settling. After all, it was an old house. But one night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, but clear enough for me to make out the words, "Laura." I froze. My heart raced. The voice came from the attic, clear as day. My blood ran cold. I got out of bed, heart hammering in my chest, and grabbed the flashlight. The attic was directly above my room, and I'd never dared to go up there since moving in. But the whispers, they called to me. I pulled the ladder down, the old wood creaking under my weight. As I climbed, the air grew colder, thicker. The smell of decay was stronger up here. The attic was cramped, filled with forgotten boxes and dusty furniture. I scanned the room, the beam of my flashlight trembling as I moved it across the cluttered space. Nothing. But then I saw it. A shadow. A figure, crouched in the corner, barely visible in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped closer, my legs shaking, and that's when I saw it. The figure wasn't moving, it was just there. And then, slowly, it shifted, turning its head toward me, and then it whispered again, "Laura." I backed away, but the shadow didn't follow. It stayed there, watching me, its eyes never leaving mine. I ran down the ladder, bolting the door behind me. But that night, I heard it again. The whisper, soft and slow, coming from the attic. "Laura, come back. The shadows are always there now, watching, waiting, and they won't let me forget." My name is Mark, and last night, I saw something staring at me from my attic vent. It started small, at first, just a light scuttling sound, almost like the scratch of mice running across the floorboards. I figured it was nothing. Old houses have their quirks, and I'd seen enough horror movies to know better than to panic. But as the days went by, the noises changed. They grew louder, thumps, like something or someone was moving in the attic. Not in the usual way that a house settles, but deliberate, almost methodical. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing. After all, the house was old, and the attic had to be full of critters. But the longer I stayed here, the more uneasy I felt. Then the breathing started. It wasn't a sound I could ignore. Soft at first, just a low, rasping breath that seemed to filter down through the vent in my ceiling. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it came at odd hours, always at night, always when everything else was silent. Each time, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hoping it was just my imagination. But the whispers came next. Faint at first, just a barely audible hum, like someone speaking in a language I couldn't understand. It wasn't like anything I had ever heard before, though. The voice wasn't human. There was a depth to it, a gravelly rasp that sent shivers down my spine. Sometimes, it would be almost mocking, other times full of a low, mournful sorrow. I couldn't place the sound. It was coming from the attic, or behind the walls. I couldn't tell. Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night, my skin crawling, my heart thudding in my chest. I didn't know why, but I felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. My eyes shot open, and my gaze immediately snapped to the ceiling vent above my bed. I froze. There, staring down at me, were two dark, lidless eyes, black as coal, without a trace of light. They were unmoving at first, but the longer I stared, the more the eyes seemed to focus on me, almost as if they were aware of my gaze. I couldn't look away. A cold sweat broke out across my back. The eyes blinked once, then slowly, ever so slowly, a faint smile began to stretch across the darkness. Beneath them, it wasn't a smile that I'd ever seen before. It was too wide, too unnatural. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My body felt paralyzed, trapped under the weight of those eyes. They were the kind of eyes that seemed to burn into your soul, watching you, not out of curiosity, but out of something darker, something hunger-filled. I don't remember falling asleep. The terror was too much. The next thing I knew, the morning light was creeping through my blinds. I was still in bed, but the sense of unease hadn't left. I told myself it was a nightmare, some trick of my mind playing on me in the dark. But then I got up and looked at the vent. It was slightly ajar. The screws normally tight were loose, as though something had been trying to get out. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. But now, every night, when I lie in bed, I can't help but wonder, is it still up there, watching me? And when will it decide to come down? My name is Daniel, and something is living in my attic. I first heard it a few weeks after moving into my new house. At night, when everything was silent, I'd hear a faint scratching above my ceiling. Just the occasional skittering noise, nothing alarming. Probably rats, I told myself. But then the scratching turned into thumping, heavy, deliberate thumps. Too heavy for rats, too slow for any animal I could think of. One night, As I lay in bed, I heard it move, a dragging sound across the attic floor. My stomach tightened. It wasn't fast. It wasn't erratic. It was slow, purposeful, like something crawling. I told myself I was imagining things. Sleep deprivation. Stress, it had to be something rational. Until I saw the attic door open by itself. I was in the hallway, passing by, when the ceiling hatch suddenly creaked downward, the folding ladder sliding open, as if something had pushed it down from above. I froze, staring up into the darkness. A single breath echoed from the attic. Long, deep, not mine. I ran, that night. I locked the attic door and shoved a chair under it. But it didn't help, because now, the noises weren't just coming from above me. They were coming from inside my walls, scraping, tapping, breathing. Last night, I woke up to the sound of something slowly dragging its nails along the ceiling, right above my bed, and, when I opened my eyes, I saw them. 2 blackened hands gripping the attic door. The latch is locked, but for how long? My name is Ethan, and I found a door in my attic that shouldn't be there. I've lived in this house for years. It's old, creaky, and honestly, a little too big for just me. The attic was nothing special, just a storage space with a few forgotten boxes and cobwebs. I'd only been up there a handful of times, until last night. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard something. Not the usual creaks of the house settling. This was different. A click, like a door unlocking. I sat up, heart hammering. The sound had come from the attic. I didn't want to go up there. Every instinct told me to stay in bed, pretend I hadn't heard anything. But my curiosity or stupidity won. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled the attic ladder down, and climbed up. The air was thick and stale, filled with the scent of dust and something faintly rotten. I swept the flashlight around. Everything looked normal, except for the door. A door that wasn't there before. It was old, wooden, and covered in deep scratch marks. My breath caught in my throat. I had been in this attic before. There had never been a door. I should have left. I should have gone back downstairs, locked the attic, and pretended I never saw it. But I didn't. I reached out and turned the handle. It was ice cold. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a narrow hallway. The walls were lined with faded, peeling wallpaper, and the floor was covered in dust. Except for one thing, footprints, leading deeper inside. I swallowed hard and took a step forward. The air was wrong in here, heavier, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. I walked slowly, my flashlight flickering. Then, I heard it. A whisper at it was faint, coming from the darkness ahead. My body froze, my breath catching in my throat. The whisper turned into a soft, wet laugh. I turned and ran. I barely made it through the door before it slammed shut behind me. The attic was silent again. The door was gone, but now, at night, I hear it. A click, like a door unlocking, and the soft sound of footsteps, coming closer. My name is Henry, and something in my attic is watching me. I moved into this house a month ago. It was a cheap rental, a little rundown, but nothing I couldn't handle. The attic wasn't even something I thought about, just a dusty space above me that I had no reason to enter until the noises started. At first, it was just faint creaks at night. Houses settle, wood shifts, nothing unusual. But then the tapping began. Light, rhythmic taps, like fingernails against wood. I tried to ignore it. Then one night, while lying in bed, I heard something worse, shuffling, not the sharp skittering of a rat or the flutter of trapped birds. This was slow, deliberate, like something was crawling right above me. I shot up, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. The noise stopped instantly. The air in my room felt heavier, charged, like someone was standing beside my bed, watching. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I decided to check the attic. I pulled the cord, and the ladder creaked as it unfolded. A wave of stale air rushed down. I hesitated, but curiosity won. The attic was almost empty, just dust, old insulation, and a few forgotten boxes. But in the farthest corner, something was off. The dust wasn't settled there. The wood looked disturbed, like something had been dragging itself across the floor. I took a step closer. My flashlight flickered, and then I saw it. A shape, huddled in the darkest part of the attic. At first, I thought it was a pile of old cloth, but then it moved. Something long and thin shifted beneath the shadows. My flashlight's beam barely caught its outline, a twisted, elongated body, its limbs bent the wrong way. Then, it turned toward me. I didn't see a face, just a deep, hollow blackness where its eyes should have been. And then it crawled toward me. I fell backward, my flashlight clattering to the floor. I scrambled down the ladder, slamming the attic door shut. My hands trembled as I locked it, backing away like a child, afraid of the dark. Now, at night, I hear it again. Not just the shuffling, not just the tapping, breathing right above my bed. My name is Oliver, and something is living in my attic. When I first moved into this old house, I didn't think much of the attic. It was just another dusty, forgotten space where the previous owner had left a few broken pieces of furniture and yellowed newspapers. I only went up there once to check if the roof was leaking. It wasn't, but I did notice something odd. The air was different, thicker, harder to breathe, and it smelled wrong, like damp wood and something faintly metallic. I didn't think about it again until the noises started. At night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I'd hear them. Whispers. They were soft at first, barely more than a breath, like someone was murmuring just behind the attic door, the kind of sound that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I told myself it was the wind, the pipes, my imagination, anything but what it really sounded like. But then the whispers turned into voices. They weren't loud, but they were clear. I couldn't make out the words, but they weren't random. They had a rhythm, a pattern, like a conversation spoken just low enough that I couldn't understand. One night, I finally gathered the courage to check. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled down the attic ladder, and slowly climbed up. The air was thick, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. My flashlight flickered as I swept the beam across the attic. Empty. Then why did it feel like someone was watching me? I turned to leave, but just as I reached the ladder, I heard it, a whisper, right in my ear. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. The attic was still empty, but the dust on the floor had changed. Footprints, not mine. They circled the attic, stopping just behind where I had been standing. Like something had been there, right behind me, whispering into my ear. I ran. I locked the attic door that night, but it didn't help. Because now, the whispers aren't just coming from above, they're coming from the walls. My name is Liam, and for most of my life, I never paid much attention to the attic in my childhood home. It was just an old, dusty space where forgotten things were stored. But after my parents passed away and I inherited the house, the attic became something else, something I couldn't ignore. It started with the noises at night. When the house was silent, I would hear faint scratching sounds coming from above. At first, I assumed it was mice, or maybe a raccoon that had somehow found its way inside. But the noises were too rhythmic, too deliberate, like something was pacing back and forth. Then came the knocking. Soft at first, just a single tap, as if something was testing to see if I would react. But over time, the knocking became more persistent, always in threes. Tap, 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 right above my bedroom. One night, I finally worked up the courage to check. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, I climbed the creaky pull-down ladder and pushed open the attic door. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the scent of old wood. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing stacks of old furniture, moth-eaten clothes, and boxers filled with things my parents had stored away. I took a step inside, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight. Then, I saw it in the far corner of the attic, half buried under an old sheet, was a wooden rocking chair. It was slowly rocking. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. There was no breeze, no open windows, nothing that should have made it move. Yet it swayed gently, back and forth, as if someone was sitting in it. That's when the whispering started. It was faint, almost like a breath against my ear. I spun around, my flashlight shaking in my grip, but I was alone. The whispering continued, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then, something cold brushed against my arm. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my bedroom. The attic door slammed shut behind me. My heart pounded as I pressed my back against the wall, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. But then, from the attic, I heard it tap, 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 tap. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I decided to check the attic again, but this time, in daylight. I climbed up the ladder, my hands trembling as I pushed open the door. The rocking chair was still there, motionless now. But something was different. On the dusty wooden floor, where my footprints from the night before should have been, there were more footprints, and they weren't mine. Small, bare footprints, leading from the rocking chair to the attic door. I don't go up there anymore, but every night, I hear it tap, 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 tap. My name is Ethan, and I never knew our house had a second attic. I grew up in a century-old house, the kind with creaky floors, hidden closets, and way too much history. The attic was nothing special, just a dusty storage space filled with forgotten junk, or at least, that's what I thought. Last winter, while replacing an old light bulb in the attic, I noticed something strange. The wooden planks on the ceiling didn't match. One section was slightly darker, with faint seams outlining a square shape. A hatch. A second attic. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed a ladder and pushed against the panel. It was heavy, but after a few shoves, it slid open with a deep groan. A rush of cold, stale air poured down, carrying a smell that made my stomach turn something between mildew and rot. I pointed my flashlight inside. The space was much smaller than the main attic, barely tall enough to stand in. The walls were lined with yellowed newspapers, their headlines from decades ago. A single wooden chair sat in the center of the room, facing the hatch, and on the floor, scratch marks, dozens of them. Long, deep gouges in the wooden planks, as if someone had been dragged across the floor. Some led to the chair, others to the walls. A chill ran through me. I was about to climb down when I saw something else in the far corner of the attic. Nestled among the shadows was a small wooden box. I don't know why, but I had the overwhelming urge to open it. Inside were old photographs, black and white images of people standing in front of my house. Their faces were blurred, smudged out as if erased. I flipped through them, my breath catching when I saw the last one. It was a picture of me, same house, same angle, but it was wrong. Because in the photo, I was standing in the attic, staring directly at the camera, and behind me, just over my shoulder, was a figure. Tall, shadowy, featureless. A creak sounded from behind me. I turned, my flashlight flickering, and for a split second, I saw movement, something shifting in the darkness. I didn't scream. I didn't stop to grab the box. I just climbed down as fast as I could and slammed the hatch shut. I nailed it closed, then dragged a bookshelf in front of it for good measure. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard something above me, a slow, deliberate scratching, right where the hatch was. My name is Daniel, and I made a terrible mistake. Opened the attic door. The house had been in my family for generations, but no one ever talked about the attic. It was always locked, the key hidden away by my grandfather. then my father. They never explained why. Just leave it alone, they would say. And for most of my life, I did. Until last week, I was cleaning out the house after my father passed away, and in the back of his desk drawer, I found the key. It was old, rusted, and strangely cold to the touch. The moment I picked it up, the house felt different. The air grew heavy, like a storm was about to break. I hesitated only for a moment before heading upstairs. The attic door groaned as I turned the key. It smelled of dust and something else, something foul, like decaying wood. I pulled the chain of the single bare light bulb and stepped inside. The room was empty. No boxes, no furniture, just dust and darkness. The only thing inside was a large, rectangular object covered by a tattered sheet. It stood against the far wall, taller than me. I pulled the sheet off. It was a mirror, old and warped, its glass covered in a film of dust. But as I wiped it clean, I felt something cold slither through my veins. The reflection wasn't right. I saw myself, but I wasn't alone. There was something behind me, a shape, too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I spun around, heart pounding, but the attic was empty. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was closer. I backed away, but my reflection didn't move. It stood frozen, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. Then it smiled. Not MIT, a wide, unnatural grin stretched across its face as its hand slowly reached forward toward the glass. The light bulb flickered and burst. I ran. I don't remember how I got downstairs, but I locked the attic door and threw the key into the fireplace. The house was silent for the rest of the night, but now, every time I pass by the attic, I hear it, a faint tapping, coming from inside the mirror.